Hey guys, it's me. I just got back from a longer 12-hour clinical shift, so it's Thursday night, 11:14 p.m. But I wanted to make a video because I haven't gotten a video up, which feels like in a really long time. And so even though it's late, I felt like this was something that I definitely wanted to talk about. And hopefully it will resonate with you guys. The last video I did was actually the Friday I was at Fancy in Boston, which was like over a month ago. And I started talking about intuitive eating and some questions you can ask yourself to start to get in just to kind of getting your toes wet into an intuitive eating and becoming a more intuitive eater. I'll try to articulate a little bit better. I feel like I'm almost slurring my words. So I wanted to kind of piggyback off of that video and talk a little bit about, I got a question from a reader a long time ago. I keep a long list of questions I get from readers and try to answer them as best that I can. So this one's kind of been sitting in the question bank for a while. But it says, I'm wondering if you could write a blog post or film a video about how to eat until you're truly full, and specifically how to be okay with leaving some food on the plate. I struggle with that a lot, where I feel guilty if I don't finish every single bite, and sometimes it leads to me feeling uncomfortably full. Do you have any techniques you could recommend that might help? She just talked about how she's good at knowing when she's hungry, but not always knowing when she's satisfied. And especially coming from an eating disorder background, she can feel like she overthinks food way too much, and she's not very good at being an intuitive kind of normal eater. So I think this is a good question, because I feel like this is a question I get so many times from women. And maybe even men too, sometimes I just tend to talk about it with women a lot more, is how to know when, or how to know how to be an intuitive eater, because I think it can get a little bit messy, because it's not just eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. There's a lot of other dynamics that play into that. And one thing that we're going to specifically talk about today is eating for satisfaction. And so I think that's a really important piece that we sometimes miss when we're only focusing on physical hunger. We miss this huge entire satisfaction piece of eating, and that which plays into how we think about food, how we feel about food, how dominating food is in our day-to-day life, like how much our thoughts are consumed with food. And so I think that's a huge important piece that we often miss. So we're going to talk about that a lot. So I'm going to talk, I have like kind of 6 points that I want to hit on for tangible steps to becoming a more intuitive eater, and how to eat for satisfaction and instead of just simply fullness. Because if we're only eating for fullness, we're actually not going to become intuitive eaters. So with that said, I'll kind of kick off these 6 points. And so one of the first things I talk about when I work with a lot of clients through Nutshell is to cut back on actually your veggie intake. And now I work predominantly with women who are coming from a restrictive eating background, and so they've eaten enough vegetables in their life to hold them over for the next 10 years. And so it's a little bit of a paradox way to look at it, is to say, okay, let's actually cut back on vegetables. And the reason why I say that is because eating tons and tons of vegetables can actually give us this like pseudo fullness, is what I call it, where we might actually be full, but it's almost like a fake full, because we're actually not satisfied. And so we actually end up being this like empty, almost bloated, watery feeling, rather than actually feeling truly full and satisfied. I'm gonna take off these glasses because they're bothering my eyes. So I always recommend to keep vegetables to literally 2 fists, and to see if you can actually eat them cooked too, because that tends to kind of bring down the bloat and stuff that can happen when we eat a ton of vegetables. And just by doing that one thing, you can actually become way more in tune with your body's own hunger and fullness cues, because it's not getting masked or muddled with tons of kind of fake fullness, which comes from, tons of water, tons of fiber, all of that stuff that comes in this huge raw vegetable intake. And so that's one thing that I actually recommend, is you're starting to get into intuitive eating, you're getting more in touch with your body's hunger and fullness cues, is to actually wean down on the vegetables. Usually if we're coming from a restrictive background, you're eating like an insane amount of vegetables a day, and vegetables are a good thing. But we're usually getting plenty. And so to cut back that and focus on good carbohydrates and focus on fats and focus on proteins and kind of cue into those and what you're actually craving, because vegetables are good, but we don't crave them 100% of the time. and start to kind of allow your body to experience and even kind of pursue other foods to see if that actually satisfies you more. So that will allow you to not only become full, but to also become satisfied. So that's one way. I also recommend too, and I talk a lot with clients about perhaps not just making everything 100% healthy. Now, I hate the word healthy food. I hate the word play food. I hate the word fun food to kind of distinguish these more like play fun foods like pizza and cupcakes and those things, because those foods do have nourishing components in them. And it's not all about just this kind of this black and white thinking with food, but for lack of a better word, what I'm talking about is not being so hyper focused on making 100% of your plate 100% these healthy foods, you know, like kale and salad and chicken and beans and all those things. You guys kind of know what I'm talking about. Because the thing is, healthy eating is not about eating healthy 100% of the time. Because I was just talking about this with a client this morning, a client I've been seeing forever, is typically you can't have 100% clean eater or a girl with a freaking six-pack and these rockin' biceps and everything else you see on the cover of a magazine and also be holistically healthy. And when I say holistically healthy, I mean spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, all of these things that play into health, because it's way more than just physical. And so usually those things are actually mutually exclusive. The woman you see who's totally enjoying her life and is really good in a really good place emotionally and mentally and psychologically with food doesn't have a six-pack and 15% body fat or 10% body fat. It just doesn't happen. And so the same thing goes with your plate. Like, being healthy is not about having the cleanest ingredients on your plate. And so I just encourage people to kind of pick a few things that you're craving that might not be 100% healthy, but they're kind of more of these like play fun foods that we eat for experience and pleasure, and pair a little bit of those with these other nourishing foods that will make you feel good physically. And start to kind of think about it that way, because then you're feeding into the satisfaction piece, and you're also feeding into this nourishment piece, and things that are going to satisfy you and also keep you physically full and satiated. And those are two huge components to being an intuitive eater. So that's point 2. The third one is actually learning what full is. After a history of restrictive eating, I think it can be really, really hard to know what the physical feeling of fullness is. And so I usually put it on a scale of 1 to 10 and to say, okay, from a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you're absolutely starving, almost going to pass out, and 10 being you're totally Thanksgiving full and you want to roll out of the room and you feel really nauseous because you're so full. Really being at around a 7 or an 8 is like some good fullness. So it's not just eating until your hunger cues go away, because your hunger cues kind of go away after the first or second or third bite, but eating to where you actually feel a satiated fullness in you, and you stop thinking about food. If you end lunch, and even though you don't feel a hunger cue, but all you can think about is your next snack, you probably are not fully satisfied. Maybe your lunch didn't have the right balance of carbohydrates, proteins, or fats, or maybe you didn't eat enough. Or maybe you waited too long in between breakfast and lunch and you got way too hungry, and so it's going to take a little bit more to satisfy you. Whatever that might mean. Your meal should be enough that you feel physically full to where your appetite actually turns off and you stop thinking about food. And so kind of learning what fullness actually feels like can be a whole new experience that people kind of have to embrace too. So that is point 3. I'm going to run through the last 3 in hopefully a couple of minutes so this video doesn't get too long. Also on that point, that's not always perfect. There are going to be times where you overshoot and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm too full. That is okay. That's a part of life. And what I always tell people is to become curious about that. Say, okay, what could I have done next time, instead of becoming judgmental about it. It should pique our interest so we learn and grow from it, and not that we kind of find ourselves in this vicious cycle of shame and guilt. Okay. I also think a good point is I find that a lot of women will kind of zone out and totally tune out when they're eating vegetables or other kind of these super low calorie, low energy foods. It almost becomes like a bingey behavior. So whether that's you're nervous or you're stressed or you're actually hungry and you're trying to fill it with like carrots or whatever for a low amount of calories, that binging on like vegetables or these low calorie foods is actually just as detrimental as like binging on cupcakes or ice cream or whatever that might look like. Because it's still really damaging mentally and it still engages a really destructive thought process. And so I think recognizing that and saying, okay, even though it's vegetables or it's carrots or it's even celery, that's not actually healthy for me mentally or emotionally. And so keeping that in mind too. Just because you're eating vegetables or these kind of low calorie foods, for lack of a better word, doesn't mean you should totally zone out and just eat mindlessly and numb out whatever feeling or emotion or whatever else might be there, because that's actually, there's a need underneath that can't actually be filled with food. And so I think that's important. A huge point too, this reader mentioned that she sometimes feels like she eats too fast. Take 20 minutes to eat a meal. Even if that means you're eating a food you could eat in literally 60 seconds, take time. Maybe that's taking a break in between bites or whatever that might be, but to really slow down and take 20 minutes to eat. That allows you to kind of cultivate awareness around your body. It allows you to kind of feel, am I still hungry? Am I too full? Sometimes when we eat too fast, we actually gulp in more air, which can make us feel fuller than we actually are. And it also creates a lot of digestive stress, which then can create cramping and some IBS type symptoms and some bloating that make us feel uncomfortable and actually don't make eating a pleasurable process, and can also gunk up our own ability to distinguish between hunger and fullness. So eating slowly, chewing your food. We have teeth for a reason, because they start the digestive process and they break down food. And we have enzymes, an enzyme called amylase in our saliva that actually starts the breakdown of carbohydrates before it ever even gets into like our internal digestive tract. So eating slowly is super important. And then lastly, remembering that food will always be there. I tell myself this too. I am human. I am not perfect. So whether it's Thanksgiving or whether it's birthday or whether it's even a weekend where I'm out to dinner or something like that, saying food is always going to be there. I eat multiple times a day and I eat hundreds of times a month. So God only knows how many times I eat per year. And no, at any point in time that I eat, is it ever going to be the last, unless I breathe my last breath today. But like, unless you're going to die or something, I know it's kind of a mortal thought. But nothing is going to be a last. Food will literally be there. Even if you eat, however much of whatever food, that food will literally be there. If you don't finish it all, it will be there in 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days. Nothing is ever a last. So we get into this really drastic thinking with, oh, this is my last time with this. And food will always be there. We're presented with tons and tons and tons of opportunity to eat. And so to kind of say, okay, food will literally always be there and I get to experience this all the time. By the grace of God, I get to experience it. And so I don't need to think that this is my very last time to eat anything. So I hope those things help. It's a process. I always tell people it's a process. It's a journey, and it can be months and years long. We are beings who are always continually learning about ourselves and the world and other people and all kinds of things. And I think that's exciting. And so we're never, health is not a destination. True holistic health is not a destination. It's actually totally a process. And so there's no kind of like end point. And so I hope that gives us tons of freedom and frees us up to just simply become curious and learn more about ourselves and learn more about other people and not put pressure on ourselves to perfect something. So anyways, I hope you guys have an awesome weekend. I have some college friends that are coming into town on Friday, and so I haven't seen them in so long, and so I'm super excited about that. And then I will be working a lot this weekend too. So a little bit of both, but it'll be busy between work and play. So anyways, I hope you guys have an awesome weekend. Get some rest, eat something awesome, slow down and enjoy it and savor it and spend time with those people that you care about most. All right, bye guys.